Door County developed an interesting maritime tradition because of several really distinct reasons. One is the geography of the area. As a peninsula, we kind of jut out into Lake Michigan. And so for most people that came to this area, they came by water. And in fact, that was true for a lot of Northeast Wisconsin in the early and mid 1800s. A lot of people, their first experience at Door County would have been on their passage to Fort Howard, which would become Green Bay. But as people came to the area, they started to settle along its coastline, and they were drawn to this area for several reasons. The way that the peninsula works is that it slopes downward to the east into Lake Michigan. And on the west side, you have a wall of essentially easy to mine limestone. And this, of course, then presented a very unique opportunity. And in fact, Sturgeon Bay, which is now known primarily for its shipbuilding, started off as a stone town. But the geology also provided another aspect to this. As it sloped down to the north and to the east, this created a lot of very shallow shoals. So these shallow shoals then created the perfect spawning grounds for whitefish and lake trout and other species that could then be harvested. The shallow reefs and the shoals that provided the amazing fisheries were also very dangerous hazards. And so as these communities developed, so did demands for any kind of way to make travel to and from and within the peninsula safer. And so then this led to the creation of some of the earliest lighthouses.
You've got an expansion of what is the new country, that'd be the United States, as it moves west. You've got immigration coming in, and you've got something that's even happening today. That's tourism. Before the Sturgeon Bay Ship Canal was dug, the only way to get to Green Bay, the town of Green Bay, you had two choices, and neither one of them were that great. Make a long sailing, and you go through Rock Island Passage. Make a shorter sailing, and you go through Death's Door. Going through Death's Door was an improvement in time. It would cut the length of your voyage. It also increased your chances of wrecking the boat. Death's Door is a narrow passage. It's not a straight passage. There are two sets of currents that go through it. And just to make it more interesting, remember you're traveling in a sailing vessel, is the winds change and can blow perpendicular to both of those currents. The net result, it's very difficult at times to pilot a boat through Death's Door.
So the government had felt that in order to be providing safety to this gateway, they needed to be putting up some lighthouses as they had done on the East Coast. The first lighthouse was put on Rock Island, and the second one was on Plum Island. That was in 1849. However, shortly afterwards, the mariners complained that it was too far west of the shipping channel.
These were early initiatives to try to kind of address this. And sometimes these would take more than a decade to get the funding for. The need would be expressed, and you would have individuals in the community actively lobby their government for it. Because nobody wanted to hear about a loved one who went down with a ship, and definitely no business leader wanted to hear about their cargo sinking down because it hit a shallow area that could have been avoided. And so lighthouses then became one part of this. The Sturgeon Bay Canal was another part of this as well. And the push for that went hand in hand with a lot of the early lighthouses that built up. The reason why there's so many lighthouses in Door County, sometimes they had to redo lighthouses. And so a classic example would be the Bailey's Harbor Birdcage. The birdcage was one of the earliest lighthouses that were built, and it was built wrong. It had a very tall cupola because of a error that was made in the original ordering and planning for the original glass panes. And then it was also built in a very poor location. It was actually, people were finding that it was guiding people in to shallows, not around them. And so the Bailey's Harbor Birdcage ended up being decommissioned, and that led to the building of Cana Island and the Bailey's Harbor Range Lights. So already, what should have been one lighthouse is turned into 3. And the same could be said with the arrangement with Plum and Pilot. Plum Island was built, but it was found after the fact that it was in a poor location to address the hazards of fog and navigation through the Death's Door Passage. And so then that required an expansion in the building of the lighthouse on Pilot Island. And so already you've got more lighthouses being built than might normally be serviced in a single area.
In the early 1820s, Augustin Fresnel develops what we come to know as the Fresnel lens. And it was an extremely important revolutionary invention, because what it did was took a single source of light and blew it up. Gave the capability of mariners being able to see this light from miles and miles away. With the Fresnel lenses, you have different, what they call orders, and basically what that means is size. Most of what you would see on the Great Lakes would be 4th and 5th order lenses. So, for instance, at Cana Island, we have a 3rd order Fresnel lens, which is actually more rare on the Great Lakes, but not far from unheard of. So, a 3rd order Fresnel lens can go up to 20 miles, which is extremely helpful for sailors on the Great Lakes.
The lighthouses were operated by lightkeepers. It was good work, it was steady work, and it was well-paying work.
The lighthouse keepers, they were families of sheer discipline. They were on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They needed to make sure that the fog signal was functional and that the light needed to be lit every night and then put out again when the sun rose the next day. They were so revered that they would make more money than the people who would go out from the life-saving service to rescue the ships in peril.
Being a lighthouse keeper wasn't an easy job either. In many cases, you would naturally live where the lighthouse would be. And in many cases, you were living in very isolated areas. Plum Island and Pilot Island, you would have to tend that light multiple times a day. You would have to supply fuel, and then you'd also have to clean that lens, because they would get dirty, especially with the old oil lamps. And so you go up there into the Fresnel lens and you have to clean it, every day. Take, for instance, the Dunlap reef lights. They built a lighthouse in the middle of the canal. They put a house up against it. There is no land around you. You are literally, when you walk out your door, you are in water. And then not only did you have to tend the light there, but you had to tend the light further down on the other portion of the reef. And so you would have to go, it doesn't matter if it's raining, you have to take a rowboat and paddle your way back and forth however many times a day in order to keep those things lit and to keep them maintained. It was not easy work, that's for sure.
Here in Door County, we're very, very fortunate to have the amount of lighthouses that we do. Although they were created out of necessity, they're also a big part of our maritime tradition, what makes us proud to call it home, and why we think that preserving that history is so important.
Now, those lighthouses are still here in Door County, and they're still being used today. In the commercial craft, the freighters that go by, and they navigate by satellite, they navigate by inertial navigation, sonar, and radar. Well, not much need for a lighthouse at that point. Matter of fact, lighthouses in the scale of things are no longer classified as a primary navigation aid. In today's world, for some folks, a lighthouse becomes a destination. But lighthouses are interwoven into the fabric of Door County, of each community that they serve. Each hazard that they mark is all part of the fabric that created the communities that's Door County today.
Say you're a captain on a schooner in 1880 and you're in the middle of a gale. And so you look out and you see that single light staring back out at you, guiding you home, guiding you to safety. And that's a deep, powerful image that I think is one worthy of being preserved. It's one worthy of being explored.